course, on the 25th of December, of course, we had a lot of activity in Manila from the time the war started until we withdrew back into Bataan. Some of that was picking up wounded people from the bombings, picking up dead bodies, this kind of thing, from the bombings of the Japanese. And on Christmas Day, 1941, we withdrew to Bataan Peninsula. There I was attached to the 3rd Battalion of the 31st Infantry, which incidentally was the only regiment of American infantry in all of the Philippines. There were some Philippine Scout infantry regiments, and they were great soldiers. I'm not making light of them. They were great soldiers, great warriors. The Filipino Army, by far and large, was ill-trained. They were not. Many of them never held a rifle, a real rifle, until the war started. They were that ill-trained, and of course, it wasn't that they didn't want to; they didn't know how. And of course, we went through the Bataan thing. I guess one of the things that I'd bring to mind in the combat and showing how God's hand comes in play. When the Japanese opened up after they received these reinforcements from Singapore, they opened up on us on Good Friday with artillery barrage. And the artillery barrage was so intense that it set the underbrush in the jungle on fire. And of course, one of the things that we did was pull the guys out of the foxholes that were too weak to get out. We actually had men, because of the lack of food, it was too weak to get out of the foxhole and take fire. And then as we pulled back off of the St. River, we started over the Mount Samak, and many men were being wounded. I hear so many reports where we wound up with the same amount of men at the surrender that we started out with before the surrender. Well, nothing's farther from the truth. We lost a lot of men. But coming over Mount Samak, they were sending up these Filipino buses, and we were using them as ambulances. And we would give first aid to these men who were wounded, and put them in a location. And whenever the Filipino buses would come, we would throw these wounded on there. Well, bus came in, and the medic on that ambulance, they was using them for ambulances, said, "This is the last one coming. No more's coming." And he said the situation is hopeless, and you men can get on this bus and go back to the hospital with us, get out of this. I said, "No, I'm assigned to the 3rd Battalion to treat the wounded." And I said, "If an ambulance doesn't come, I'll treat them with what I have." But the other 3 that were acting as litter bearers jumped on that ambulance, and it took off, but it didn't go 50 yards until the Japanese dive bomber blew it apart. Everyone in it, of course, was lost. Now, I didn't say that because I was brave. I just felt a real strong sense of being with the 3rd Battalion and fulfilling what I'm supposed to do. Well, we of course, when we took this walk, I was in a group along toward, not in the middle, but along toward the latter part of the group, and so things were going on ahead of me. But one of the things that amazed me, I'd not gone very far until there was I never got out of sight of dead Americans, bodies that had been shot, bayoneted, or else just died on their feet. And one of the things that helped me to make the Death March, as it came to be known, I have no idea why they call it a march. We staggered down that road, more dead than alive. And the length of the walk had nothing to do with it. We were in such poor physical health. Many of the men already were suffering from malnutrition before we ever started because of the lack of food. But there was 3 of us. The night before the surrender, our commanding officer said, you can do anything you want to. We're releasing you to, if you have connections, then you can go to them. Well, the 3 fellows that I was real close to 2 other fellows, and we decided that we were just going to stick together and see what happened, because we didn't have any place to go. And it wasn't, a lot of people say, well, why didn't you join a guerrilla group? It wasn't that easy to join a guerrilla group. You better know somebody in that guerrilla group, or you wasn't going to join it. You were just going to be left out there in the jungle, because they were very, very careful about who they let in the guerrilla group. But if it had not been for Filipinos that risked their lives to throw food out of the little old WIBURN windows, there wouldn't have been an American making it. We wound up at San Fernando and was then loaded into these narrow gauge box cars of the Philippines. We were crammed in these box cars, and this is so hard for people to believe. We were crammed in those box cars until if a person passed out, they couldn't fall. There wasn't room to fall. If they died, there wasn't room for them to fall. So we didn't know who was dead or who was alive until we got over to cops and began to unload, and then they began to fall. Another thing I want to bring out is when we unloaded at Caucus and went down into the barrio, that's what they call the small towns, or the barrio. They put us, about every barrio that I know anything about in the Philippines has a town square, I'd say. And so this is where the Japanese took this trainload of prisoners, and they had a rope already strung around there. And there were Filipino Red Cross women that was there with their baskets of rice balls, raw sugar, candy, this kind of thing. And they pick up the basket to come in, and they were bashed in the face. Another lady would pick up that lady's basket and start in, and the same thing. I never saw a more heroic act in all of our combat than those Filipino ladies, as they were bound and determined to get that to us. Finally, the Japanese officer hollered something at it. Of course, I didn't know what he hollered, but they stopped and let the ladies come in. And if it hadn't been for that, we wouldn't have made those other 6 miles out to O'Donnell, because we were very, very weak and down. While at O'Donnell, I was not only put in the zero ward, which was a place to die, but I was put under it, a place for burial. I mean, you were supposed to be dead when you were put under the zero ward. But I had a buddy by the name of Gerald Peden, who lives in Lumberton, Texas. He came over to check on me, and I wasn't. He said, "Where's the kid?" That's my nickname on Bataan. He said, "Well, they put him under." Well, is he dead? And I don't understand me. I didn't know anything about this until Gerald told me. Is he dead? No. Well, we don't know. I guess so. They put him under there. So he crawled under there. And all of that human excrement that fell down through those bamboo slats, because fellows had dysentery and all of that, amongst those dead bodies, and pulled me out. And he found out I was still alive. So he put me over in a little old shed that was there on the prison camp ground, and cleaned me up. Whenever I came to, I don't know how many days later it was, he was taking rice and putting it as far down my throat as he could, and was working the muscles in my throat whenever I came to. And of course, I recognized him right away, and I said, "Well, what's going on?" "No," I said, "Where am I?" I think that's what I said, "Where am I?" He said, "Well, you're supposed to be up on the hill buried." But he said, "I'm going to get enough rice down here that you're going to make it." And that's one of the traumatic experiences that I had at O'Donnell. In July, they transferred us to Cabanatuan. But I was fortunate, and I mean fortunate, to be shipped to Japan early. And this was really miraculous, because at that time, the only ones they were taking were the healthiest. I was barely able to walk. And they came down and told me, "Hey, kid, your name's on the list." And the rumor is that detail is going to Japan. Oh, hey, I was glad, because I knew that I could not live in the Philippines. I had had attack after attack of malaria. I had stayed sick, and I knew that I could not survive in the Philippines. And incidentally, had another attack of malaria after I got to Japan. We went on what come to be known as the hell ships, one of the hell ships. What it was is a freighter, and they put these prisoners in the hold, and so thick you couldn't all sit down. It didn't take long for you to be able to sit down, though, because they died pretty fast. And the way they let the food. Now all of the restroom facilities that we had was a 5-gallon bucket. It didn't really matter because there wasn't room enough to get to the bucket anyway. And then they'd let the food down on a rope. And of course, the hunger was so drastic that much of the food was lost in the human excrement that finally, it was all over. And by the time we got to Japan, human excrement was almost half ankle deep when we got to Japan. And when we got to Japan on Thanksgiving Day, I went to Japan on the Nagano-Maru. They took the turrets, the fire turrets on the pier there, and washed us down. And all this excrement, they washed us down with these fire turrets. And then they put us on a train and delivered us to different places in Japan. I wound up at Umeda Bunsho, which is in Osaka. And there, the next morning, I woke up with pneumonia. They put me in the hospital, and I want to say that in 41 months of prison camp, I never saw a dose of medicine administered to any prisoner of war, not one dose. So they didn't administer any medicine to me, and I had pneumonia. But a pharmacist mate, one of our prisoners, walked by the rooms in this prison camp were open on one end, and a great big hall going down through here. And I happened to be on the bunk closest to this hallway, and this Navy pharmacist mate stopped. I didn't know him from anybody. He stopped. He saw, I was pretty bad. He asked me what was the matter, and I told him I had pneumonia. And he said, well, what are they giving you? I said, they're not giving me anything. And he said, well, could I do anything for you? And I said, well, if you would, roll me over. I'm too weak to roll over. And the next morning, he came by and gave me a dose of sulfur. He was careful not to let anybody see it. Now mind you, I didn't even know this fellow. He said, take this, don't tell anybody, any prisoner, until after the war's over. He said, I broke into the Japanese pharmacy last night and stole this sulfur drug. That evening, he brought me another dose. of sulfur drug. Next morning, next evening. But the funny part of it, every morning before I got this sulfur drug, this Japanese doctor, accompanied by the American doctor, he'd come by and he'd laugh. Ashita Senda. Those words meant that tomorrow you'll be dead. And then, directly I started walking. Boy, they, Nani, what could her name? That means this is crazy. We don't understand this. And this buddy of mine told me, he said, as quick as you can, not whenever you feel like it, but as quick as you can, you ask to go to work. He said, we're working in a freight yard. We're able to steal some food. And you'll be all right. So I did. And he, I don't know how he managed it, but he managed it to where I was working with him. And those things that, you know, I couldn't, he'd help me out with. But it's things like that that linger on my mind, because it was most of us, and I say us, most of us turned into animals as quick as we were captured. It was survive. It was survive. Whatever it took, survive. But there were those, like these two that I've mentioned, that went the extra mile for you. Stick their neck out for you, this kind of thing. I found out pretty quick, I was bad to whistle tunes, you know. The time I was able to whistle, I started whistling tunes, little old kid, you know. Well, it became habitual. The Japanese didn't like you whistling tunes. I believe that I got more, not hard beatings, but beatings from whistling than I did anything else. Because, and then, because it was habitual, the whooping didn't matter, because I was going to whistle again. You know, it's just habitual. And so they got the idea that I was crazy. Well, I found out that was a tremendous advantage to me. Now, they would beat the fire out of a crazy man, but they didn't care anything about killing him. I don't know what it was. I haven't found out yet. But they were not anxious to kill him. They beat him, but they didn't want to be around him any more than they had to. So consequently, I was in 3 different camps in Japan. The first move out of every camp, I was on it. Whenever we got the rumor that somebody's gonna be sent out, I said, well, I'm gonna get to see some more of the country, because I was in that group, and that's a fact. Come to find out, there was 106 of us at Tanagua that were shipped from Tanagua to over on the west coast, a place called Omi. And I found out that the reason they called us the 106 worst prisoners of war, because we were the worst to cooperate. We wouldn't cooperate with it. You know, I don't mean that we were so brave that we just stood there, you know. I'm talking about we were not real productive. And when the opportunity came to sabotage something, we sabotaged it. I remember at Tanagua, we were digging holes for the dry dock. And we kept trying to figure out now how in the world can we sabotage this thing. And it finally dawned on us. We all got together with the winchman, which was an American prisoner. And we said, now, whenever we give this certain signal, we've got this pin in upside down. So just as you get to the top, give that winch a jerk, and it'll give enough slack for that pin to fall out, and those cars will tear everything up. He did. Gave him the signal, and had those cars loaded good. And just before it started, that pin fell out. And those cars come down that into that hole, tore up the rails, tore up the ramp, tore up the cars. They couldn't figure out how that pin broke. And you know, God's hand again, they never found that pin. Never found that pin. Because if they'd found that pin, as dumb as they were, they would have known how it came here. But those kind of things, and then one other incident, prison camp incident that I want to tell you about. When we first got to this place, Omi, they put us in the rock quarry. Rock quarry, this rock was actually ore that they loaded and carried and got it down to the crusher, and they'd crush it and then haul it over to the furnaces, big open hearth furnaces, to smelt it out. And of course, my dad taught me how to work. If my dad was building a fence, I was out there with him building a fence. Whatever and because of that, I knew how to make it look like I was working when I wasn't getting anything done. You know. And so in this, I wasn't interested in their quota, you know. And on this day, the guy that was working with me, the one that had been working with me, got tired of getting whooped up on, so he got somebody else to work with. And this guy said, I want to work with you. I said, you better be sure you pay a price when you work with me. I said, because we don't get it done. We'll never quota. They'll be eating noodles in the brake shack when we're still busting rock out there. And we had gone down and dumped a load. And coming back, way down on the end of this spur was 2 English fellows. See, we were in a camp with 400 English. That's why they sent us sorry prisoners over there, figuring these English get us straightened out. And they were way down on the end of this spur, and so I said, we're going to pull in here. Oh, I said, those fellas about loaded. I said, I know it, we're going to pull in here. So we pulled in there, and they were so busy, they never looked up. We chalked our car and started moving. They got theirs loaded, and here they come. Hey, we're a quota. And I said, oh, we are too. We quota. Well, we're loaded. Well, good. Help us here. We'll load up and go down and dump. Oh, man, they got mad. Went down and got the Japanese guard. See, the guard actually just stayed down in the guard shack down there. And they ran down there and got him. One of them did. One Englishman went got her. Oh, he came up that hill, bockling and cootering, and that's all bad words, you know. And when he got there, he really, and then he went back down the guardhouse. Of course, we got the sledges and started beating on these big old rocks that dynamite barrels and blowing them apart. And this Englishman, of course, we got the thing about, by that time we had it about 3/4 loaded. These Englishmen, this one Englishman went down there and got the guard again. Well, that guard was so angry. When he came up there, he pulled the chalk out from under the wheel of that car and cracked me across the head with it. Blood just squirted. But I started laughing. When he jerked that chalk out from under that car, I knew what was going to happen. See, that chalk was not only to stop it while we were loading, that chalk was also to be used when we were carrying it down to the crusher to keep it from getting away, because it was going downhill. That car took off down there, and here this car took out after it. I don't know what he'd done if he'd caught it. That car hit that crusher. I mean, crusher, shack, everything just went flying. Me laying there laughing, and this buddy of mine said, "Don't do that, they'll kill you." I said, "Hey, I got news for you. They probably gonna kill us anyway, whether I laugh or not." But I couldn't help it. It was so funny to me, you know, because he realized immediately what he had done. But there wasn't anything he could do about it then. Well, directly we looked up, and here comes a camp commander, Japanese camp commander, in the only car in the whole town. Here he comes. I told this buddy of mine, I said, "Well, here we go." But that car stopped down there at the shack, at the guard shack. That officer took this guard out in the open where everybody could see it and started beating on this guard. Finally, I guess he got tired of beating on him, so he got somebody else, one of the other soldiers, Japanese soldiers, to beat on him. Well, loaded him in that car, and we never saw him anymore. I told my buddy, I said, "Well, we'll get ours when we get to camp." Would you believe that we never heard another thing? That camp commander put all the blame on that guard. They did not even reprimand us, and we figured there's a good chance, you know, they may kill us. Didn't even reprimand us. But we didn't load any rock anymore for several days while they tried to round up some material to fix that crusher with. Well, there wasn't even need of loading it because you couldn't crush it. But those kind of things really is what kept me going, you know.
Do you know what I'd love to hear, if in fact that's within your experience? Several of the men who were in Japan talk about how at the very end the machine guns on the wall were turned inward, or there were rumors, or they took everything away that might identify someone. You know, it was all of this evidence to them that they were all going to be massacred. Did anything like that happen?
Probably those men were over on the East Coast. You follow me what I'm saying? I was over on the west coast of Honshu. The Japanese knew that the landing was going to take place on the East Coast. And there's no doubt in my mind, because they found records that stated they were going to kill us whenever they were landed. But no, there was not that took place in the camp where I was. As a matter of fact, things lit up for us real good. What I don't mean we got more food or things like that, but suddenly we couldn't understand, you know, the eating. You had to do something pretty bad after the atomic bomb fell. You had to do something awful bad to get it, you know. And then, of course, that's another thing that I need to tell. I knew that the war was going to end August the 15th on the evening of August the 14th. And I was assigned, we were working nights on these furnaces. I was assigned the mess detail, which is two buckets. And the mess fellow responsible for the mess walked in the back. And we were walking out to work. And this Japanese fellow, I didn't even know he was there until he said something in English. And the thing he said was, "Don't look at me." And I thought, well, hey, it dumbfounded me that he could speak such good English. I thought to myself, hey, I'm not interested in looking at you anyway. You know, he said, the war's going to be over tomorrow. And this got my attention, you know. And he said, as a matter of fact, he said, I'm on my way home. And home is Corpus Christi, Texas. He said, I've been over here with intelligence. And he said, I'm on my way home. Well, I said, I can't tell these guys that, because even some of the Americans begin to think us crazy. Yeah, they really. So I held this to myself. But we had our meal at midnight. Well, when we sat down there, and I knew it was past midnight, I couldn't hold it anymore. I said, well, fellas, this is a day we've been looking for. How many times have you said that? It's always been today, tomorrow, or another month. Or I said, no, it's the end of it. Well, that evening that the war was over, we were to come out and work 18 hours where we could change from nights to day shift. When we started in, I told them, I said, hey, I'm not going to bed. This is it. I'm going to watch this. You make any noise, your head is ours. I said, don't you worry about it. Well, about a little afternoon, after 12, a little after 12, the camp commander, there was glass in the wall. You could see right into his office. And he was there at his desk, listening to the radio. I saw the radio, so I figured he was on the radio. I couldn't hear it. And directly, he dropped his head over on the desk. I'll never forget this scene as long as I live. He dropped his head over on his desk. And then I guess when he collected himself, well, he got up and he took his saber off and laid it on the desk. Took all of his medals off, laid them on the desk. All of the paraphernalia. Then all the guards came he sent the guards out. Well, I knew where they were going. Well, we already had the rope stolen in this camp to hang every guard when the war was over. In all of the almost 3.5 years of prison camp, I never heard anyone question who was going to win the war. There was no doubt in our mind that America was going to win the war. So we had this rope, stole it, and hid it, ready to hang them. And I'm so glad. I've got enough to live with. I'm so glad they didn't come back. I don't have that to live. And I've gone back to this campsite. But anyway, when I sent those guards out, I ran it. I couldn't hold them. Hey, it's over. It's over. I got called some names I've never heard before. How? I got cussed, discussed, recussed. Finally, one old boy, he climbed down off of the upper bay. And he said, "What's your?" I said, "Come here, I said." Went over there, and Japanese camp commander didn't have any paper on. I said, "See that?" I said, the guards just went out. We got to get the rope ready. And so we did. We got the rope where we'd hit it. But the guards were smart enough. They never came back. They just kept going. And then whenever the details all got in, the camp commander, Japanese, always spoke to the interpreter. The interpreter was gone. In the best English that we had heard since we'd been at camp, he told us the England and America had done something that no one had been able to do for 4,000 years. That's defeat Japan. So he addressed the English camp commander and said, I surrender myself to you. And all of this whole camp, this camp surrendered to you. And he said, I'm at your disposal. What do you want to do? But the English officer said, you can go your way, go home. But needless to say, another thing I want to bring out, we went down, while we were out there, this British camp commander said, we're going to fall out in the morning, 8 o'clock for close order drill. Of course, 65 Americans that were left alive. I'm talking about right out loud. And he said, we've got to look smartly. We looked quick. We weren't interested in looking smartly. We were interested in going to town hunting food. And so the next morning, that's what we did. We went down into the field. Actually, we went down there to whoop up on some people, kill some folks. But we saw these little hungry kids. And we saw that these people were as hungry as we were. And so, when the Americans dropped the supplies of everything, every day we go in the day, we took all these Japanese rations and carried them down to the village. And then the Americans dropped enough supplies in there to fed 4 villages. So we took a mess of that, and then the camp commander said, you're president of the company there, the head of the company, he said, I've got a car coming. Tell him where you want to go and he'll carry you. If he doesn't know where it is, he can find out where it is. So this car came. Then he said, I want you to come back and we're going to have lunch here in the guest house. So we went to these different, and incidentally, the old furnace building where I worked was still there in that factory. And so I told this fellow, I said, I want to go where the old furnaces were. He said, well, the furnace is not there. I realized that. I just want to go where they were. He said, the building's still there. I said, it is. Yeah. So we went to the building. I got inside a Japanese factory that was under security. And I said, you know what? He said, you want to go up there? I said, yes. I went up there and I called him over and I explained. I said, of course, they knew, all the workers at the factory evidently had been told about us. I said, right here was the pig iron furnaces, and right over there was the carbide furnaces where they made carbide. Yeah. And I said, the Ginjo cars came down a rail right here. And the Ginjo right over there. Yeah. I said, stand. I said, you're standing at the #1 rake. This is what I want. I said, now right over to your right would have been a 55-gallon drum of water. And just before your clothes caught on fire from the heat of that furnace, you were allowed to jump in this water. But as quick as your clothes were wet and they weren't going to catch on fire, you better be out of that barrel on that rake again. I said, we got a steam bath several times a day, because when you came out there with those wet clothes. But that's some of the highlights of my experiences. And if it would be permissible, I would like to say that I was very, very disappointed in my liberation. I was very, very disappointed in my liberation. I had dreamed of them breaking down the gate and all that. Well, we got word to stay in the camp. And then finally, on September the 6th, they got called on the phone to the camp and said, catch the train that we're sending and come to Yokohama. Now, mind you, we're all the way across Honshu from Yokohama. No troops. Just us. Just us. We got to Yokohama, and my nightmare started. I mean, my new nightmare. We were lined up there, being deloused. And there were some fellows I found out later were doctors. That was at random pulling people, you know, out of the line and debriefing them. And so this fella, he was either, I think he was a captain, as well as I remember. he asked me, you know, well, where did you surrender? I said, I didn't surrender. Oh, I thought you were one of these. I said, I am. I said, none of these men surrendered. I said, every one of them was surrendered by their commanding general. Well, where did that happen? I said, on Bataan. He said, oh, you made the death march. I said, no. He said, well, how'd you get out? I said, we walked out. Well, you made the death march. I said, hey, I never heard of the death march. You know? And then he thought I was getting smart with him, you know. And he asked me, you know, how much food I got on the death march, and I told him. Then he asked me how I got to Japan. I told him, and I said, by the time we got to Japan, we were wading, we were in human feces, half ankle deep. Humans can't live in that. I said, I know they can't, but some of us did. And then he asked us how much we worked in Japan, how many hours, you know, and what we got to eat. Nobody can live on that. I said, I know they can't. Some of us did. I said, not all of us, but some of us did live. And then he got angry. Oh, he got angry. His face turned red and he jumped up. And he said, we didn't call you over here for a war story. I said, I didn't come over here to give you one either. I said, you asked me some questions and I answered them well as I could. And but I said, I want to tell you one thing. I didn't call him captain, nothing else. I said, I want to tell you one thing. Next guy you call over here, call him a liar, he may just come over and kill you. I said, death doesn't mean anything to us. We've lived with it for 3.5 years. And your life or my life doesn't mean that much to us. He said, did you know I was an officer? I said, did you know I don't care? He said, you are opening yourself up for a court-martial. Well, I just started laughing. I mean, laughing right out loud. I said, I want to ask you a question now. What in the world could y'all do to me that hadn't been done to me in the last 3.5 years? And he, get back in line, get back in line. Well, whenever I reported at Brooks General in San Antonio, after it took us until October to get back to Frisco and to November to get back to where we were going to report to the hospital. And that was inexcusable. As many ships as we had in the Pacific, that was inexcusable. And not only that, but the discrimination in the services irked me. Every sailor, every Navy man, and every Marine flew from Tokyo back to the States. Army, now they did fly us to Okinawa and then eventually get us off of there and get us down to the Philippines. But there we sit. And we sit there and sit there and sit there. And finally, they started loading us on troop ships to get us back to the States. When I got to Brooks General, they locked me up. They locked me up. Bad taste in my mouth. Now mind you, I was a career man. I lied about my age to get in at 17. And I was going to retire at 37, or 47 at the most. I couldn't figure out now, what in the world are they doing, locking me up? So the little old head psychiatrist called me, came up to see me. I reported in on Sunday and they locked me up. And he came up and he said, how you doing? I said, oh, give me another night or two and I'll be down here manning my machine gun, yelling and screaming like the rest of them. I said, I doubt very, very quickly. But I said, I want to tell you one thing. If one of these corpsmen do to me what I saw one of them do last night, he's a dead duck. I said, you can put that down. And you put it down, I said so. And you better tell them, because I am dead serious. They're not going to beat me with a wet towel. They're not going to hit me with a wet towel. They're not going to hit me with anything and live. I'll kill them. I may not be able to kill them while I'm here in this room because I don't have anything to kill them with, but I will kill them. Well, that didn't help my case any. So, they started giving me these tests, you know. And then finally he sent for me to come down to his office. I went down there and he said, you know why you're in here? I said, I have no earthly idea why I'm in here. He said, number one, the Japanese sent back a report that you were crazy, that you were dangerous. And number two, do you remember Dr. So-and-so? And I said, no, I don't remember. I said, if I was in camp with him, I don't remember him. I don't remember that name. Oh, he wasn't in camp. I said, well, I don't. He said, he was the doctor that was talking with you at Yokohama. I said, oh, you mean that nut? He said, well, he sent a report in on me too that we better keep a close eye. He reported you also dangerous. And but he said, you know, we've given you all these tests, and you check out all right. I said, would you put that in writing? I said, I'd probably be the only man that ever went to the psycho ward and came out with proof that I wasn't crazy. but I just did not think that I was treated properly coming on, and I still don't think so. Don't misunderstand me. I'm appreciative now of what the changes in the VA. I'm appreciative of the changes in the hospitals. Now you're treated like people. For a long time, you go to the VA hospital, hey, I don't know what they had, what kind of burr they had on the saddle, but I had to tell one of the doctors there one time, hey, I'm just no veteran, but I'm a human being. If you're going to talk to me, you can talk to me like a human being, or you're not going to talk to me. And I don't say that to, oh man, I'm rough and I'm tough. But I say that because I'm grateful for the changes that have been made. Now you go in, and especially in Houston, I believe that they're doing everything they can for the veterans, and I appreciate that.
I think, well, sorry, we just have a minute left. Oh, okay, turn it off.